A shocking confrontation unfolds as a police officer abuses his authority, blocking a calm black doctor late at night. Witnessed by bystanders, the scene brims with arrogance, humiliation, and silent strength. The chapter ends on a sharp, tense cliffhanger that hints at a hidden truth yet to be revealed. We don't let people like you into this neighborhood. The words cut through the cool night air like a jagged blade. Blue and red siren lights painted the quiet suburban street, turning white fences and freshly cut lawns into a grotesque theater of flashing shadows. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, faces half hidden, their curiosity blending with silent fear. Officer Bradley leaned against the hood of his cruiser, his flashlight beam stabbing into the face of the man he had just stopped. His smirk carried the weight of arrogance, the kind that comes from years of unchecked power. The man he blocked stood tall, silent, his dark tailored suit gleaming under the harsh light. A stethoscope dangled from the open leather bag he carried, catching faint glimmers as though mocking the officer's ignorance. His name tag, Dr. Elijah Cole, rested visibly on his chest, but Bradley's eyes refused to see it. "You heard me," Bradley barked, stepping closer. "This is a private area. People here don't need troublemakers hanging around." A hush fell over the street. A child's bicycle, left on a driveway, glimmered in the police lights. An old woman stood frozen at her doorway, holding her robe tight, afraid to breathe too loud. The entire scene was staged like a cruel performance, and Bradley relished being center stage. Dr. Cole said nothing. His stillness was not weakness. It was control, a silence that unsettled more than shouting ever could. He didn't flinch when the flashlight beam burned into his eyes, nor when Bradley's hand rested casually on the holster at his side. "You, deaf or just too proud to answer?" Bradley sneered, and in one swift, petty motion, he snatched the ID card from Cole's breast pocket. He squinted at it, lips curling into a laugh. "Doctor, huh? Cute, real cute. Maybe in your side of town. Not here." A murmur rippled through the hidden crowd. Even in the shadows, people shifted uncomfortably, their silence complicit, their fear louder than their voices. Dr. Cole finally raised his eyes, calm, unwavering, steady as stone. His voice was low, measured. "Do you always confuse arrogance with authority, officer?" The question sliced through the night. No shouting, no aggression, just piercing dignity. Bradley's smirk faltered for the briefest second, but arrogance quickly patched the crack. He shoved the ID into his pocket instead of returning it. "Careful, Doc. Don't want to end up in cuffs for resisting, or worse." His hand tapped the gun again, a gesture designed for fear, but Cole didn't move. Instead, he adjusted the strap of his bag and stepped an inch closer, not in defiance, but with the composure of someone who had stood in operating rooms where seconds decided life or death. His presence was heavier than the officer's threats, his silence louder than sirens. From the corner of the street, a car door slammed. A small figure came running, sneakers slapping against the pavement. Her voice cracked the tension like glass shattering. "Daddy? What's going on?" Every head turned. A girl no older than 12 stood at the edge of the light, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. The badge on Bradley's chest suddenly felt heavier as his daughter stepped closer, confusion clouding her innocent face. Dr. Cole's gaze softened, not at Bradley, but at the child. The street went silent, the only sound the faint hum of the police cruiser's engine. And then, just as Bradley opened his mouth to reclaim control of the scene, his daughter's eyes welled with tears. "Daddy, why are you yelling at him?" The girl's voice trembled, carried on the cold night air. Her blonde hair shimmered under the flashing lights as she stepped closer, her small hands clutching the edges of her jacket. Neighbors who had been pretending not to watch leaned forward, their curiosity sharpened by the sudden innocence that pierced the scene. Officer Bradley stiffened. For the first time that evening, he seemed caught off guard. His hand instinctively dropped from his holster, his posture faltering. The authority he had worn like armor cracked under the weight of his daughter's tears. "Emily, get back in the car." His voice barked, but there was no conviction in it. He sounded less like a commanding officer and more like a father trying to control the uncontrollable. Emily didn't move. Her gaze shifted between her father and the tall man standing in front of him. Her wide eyes landed on Dr. Cole, who remained still, his calm presence so different from the rage that had dominated the street just moments earlier. Why is he crying inside?" Emily whispered, her words stumbling, her lip trembling. Question wasn't meant for anyone in particular, yet it seemed to echo across the entire neighborhood. The old woman at her doorway tightened her robe, whispering something to herself. A man across the street turned away, ashamed at his silence. The scene was no longer just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Bradley's jaw tightened. "Emily, you don't understand." This man, Dr. Cole, finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of patience honed through years of endurance. "She understands more than you think." The officer's eyes snapped toward him, but before Bradley could fire back, Emily's tears spilled freely. She shook her head, her small fists clenching. "Daddy, he didn't do anything. Why are you being mean?" The words landed heavier than any accusation, heavier than the weight of the badge Bradley carried. His daughter's voice was pure, untouched by the bitterness of the world, and it stripped him bare in front of his own neighbors. A long silence stretched. The flashing lights reflected in Emily's tears, painting her face an alternating blue and red, a fragile portrait of innocence caught in a storm. Dr. Cole bent slightly, lowering himself to Emily's level. He didn't reach for her, didn't invade her space. He simply met her eyes with the same steady composure he had shown all night. "Sometimes," he said softly, "people forget what respect looks like. But it's never too late to remember." Bradley's face burned. The quiet dignity of those words carried farther than his threats ever could. He stepped forward, his voice strained. "Back off, Doc. Don't talk to her." But Emily had already heard enough. Her sobs grew louder, echoing into the night, unraveling the officer's control thread by thread. Neighbors exchanged glances, sympathy for the child, disdain for the father who couldn't hold his authority together. Bradley reached out to grab Emily's arm, desperate to end the scene, but she pulled back, shaking her head violently. "No. You're the one being bad, Daddy." The words shattered what little command he still held. Gasps rippled through the hidden audience. The symbol of law and order reduced to a man publicly rebuked by his own child. And through it all, Dr. Cole remained still, his silence an unshakable mirror reflecting Bradley's collapse. The night had turned, though the story was far from over. Because buried in the silence was a truth none of them expected, a truth that would break the last fragments of Bradley's pride. "Emily, enough." Bradley's voice thundered, louder than the siren still spinning atop his cruiser. His words weren't just orders anymore, they were desperate, frantic, laced with fear that his crumbling authority might never be pieced back together. But Emily didn't flinch. Tears streaked her cheeks as she looked between her father and the man he had cornered. "You're scaring everyone. Even me." The admission sliced through him sharper than any blade. For a moment, Bradley's jaw slackened, his grip on his daughter's arm loosening. He scanned the row of houses, their windows glowing faintly, silhouettes visible behind curtains. Too many eyes. Too much judgment. His badge had always shielded him. Tonight, it was burning against his chest. Dr. Cole didn't move. His steady gaze carried no malice, only an unshakable calm that turned Bradley's rage back on itself. He spoke, voice low but carrying. "Children see truth clearer than Grown men, officer. They haven't learned how to lie to themselves yet. The words landed heavy. Bradley's fists clenched. You think you can stand there, lecturing me, in front of my own kid? Cole tilted his head, the faintest trace of sorrow in his eyes. No, I think your daughter's already said more than I ever could. Emily's lip quivered, her small voice breaking the silence. Daddy, please, just give him his card back. Bradley froze. He had nearly forgotten the ID tucked in his pocket, the symbol of his arrogance still burning against the fabric. The neighbors hadn't forgotten. Neither had Cole. Whispers stirred from across the street. A man murmured, "It's his license. He's a doctor." The words passed like a ripple, reaching ears one by one, until the crowd that had pretended to stay silent was now awake, restless. Bradley felt the ground shifting beneath him. Every second of hesitation became another nail in the coffin of his authority. Back inside, all of you. He roared, but his voice cracked halfway, more plea than command. Curtains twitched, but no one obeyed. Too many years of fear held their tongues, but tonight something was different. Tonight, they smelled weakness. Emily tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling. Daddy, why are you being like this? He didn't hurt anyone. Bradley turned to her sharply, but her tears stopped him cold. It wasn't the rebellion of a stranger he was fighting. It was the innocence of his own blood. His daughter's disappointment cut deeper than any public humiliation. Dr. Cole finally stepped forward, not aggressively, but with the composed confidence of a man who knew himself. His shadow stretched beneath the swirling lights, tall, unwavering. Return the ID, he said, his tone neither request nor demand. It belongs to me. The officer's hand hovered over his pocket. His chest rose and fell, breath ragged. In his mind it was a battlefield. Pride against decency. Arrogance against truth. For years the badge had been his mask. Tonight, his daughter was tearing it away piece by piece. Emily whispered again, this time barely audible but powerful enough to echo in the silence. Daddy, please don't be the bad guy. The words landed like a hammer blow. Gasps escaped from hidden throats across the street. The arrogance that had carried Bradley through countless nights on patrol seemed to shatter, splintering under the weight of his child's plea. His fingers brushed against the ID in his pocket and froze. The moment stretched, unbearable, as if the entire neighborhood held its breath. And then, from the far end of the street, another car engine roared to life. Headlights cut through the darkness, approaching fast. Someone else was coming. Someone who would not stay silent. The headlights burned brighter than the cruiser's sirens, flooding the quiet street in a beam of raw white light. The car slowed to a stop, tires crunching against the pavement. Silence following as the engine died. Every head turned. Officer Bradley stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for his belt again. Stay back, he barked into the night, though his voice lacked its usual edge. His authority was slipping, and he knew it. The driver's door opened. A tall man in a gray suit stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. His presence was commanding, not loud, not aggressive, but firm, like someone who had walked into chaos before and knew how to bend it into order. Gasps whispered from behind curtains. The man was Councilman Harris, a local official whose face was well known from town meetings and community boards. His reputation was one of integrity, the kind of leader people whispered about with reluctant respect. Officer Bradley, Harris's voice carried across the street, low but sharp. What exactly is going on here? Bradley's face flushed. The badge on his chest felt heavier with every second. He squared his shoulders, but the confidence he wore like armor earlier was cracking. Routine stop, sir. Just questioning a suspicious individual. Harris's gaze slid to Dr. Cole. His eyes lingered on the bag, the stethoscope still glinting faintly, the ID badge half visible in Bradley's pocket. His brow furrowed. Suspicious? He repeated slowly, his voice laced with disbelief. Emily tugged on her father's sleeve, her tears streaking her cheeks. "Daddy, tell him the truth." The neighbors murmured again, restless. Bradley's knuckles whitened at his daughter's defiance. "Emily, enough!" But Harris's voice cut him off, sharper this time. "Enough indeed. Officer, I don't see a threat here. I see a doctor, a neighbor, and I see a man abusing his badge." The words slammed into Bradley like a fist. His lips parted, ready to argue, but his voice died before it reached the air. The weight of Harris's authority, pressed down heavier than any rulebook or manual. Dr. Cole remained silent, his calm more powerful than 1,000 protests. He stood as though carved from stone, eyes steady, letting the cracks in Bradley's pride widen with every passing second. "Return his ID," Harris ordered quietly, but firmly. The street froze. Bradley's hand hovered over his pocket again, fingers brushing against the plastic card he had stolen. To give it back now would be to admit weakness in front of his daughter, his neighbors, his community. His pride screamed against it. His chest heaved with the struggle. Emily's soft voice broke the silence. "Daddy, please, don't be the bad guy." It was the second time she had said it, and this time even Harris's stern gaze softened. The words were too raw, too true, the kind of words that couldn't be argued with, couldn't be silenced. Bradley clenched his fist around the card, his jaw tight. His pride trembled, collapsing beneath the weight of innocence and judgment. And then, slowly, he pulled the ID from his pocket. The plastic glimmered under the spinning lights as if mocking him, reflecting the truth he had tried to bury. But just as the card lifted into the night air, another sound broke the silence. A sharp cough. Dr. Cole pressed a hand to his chest, his breathing suddenly uneven, his body swaying under the stress of the confrontation. His composure flickered for the first time. Gasps echoed across the street. Emily's eyes widened in terror. "Daddy, he's sick." The moment shattered everything. Dr. Cole staggered, one hand pressed against his chest, the leather bag slipping from his shoulder. His breath came in uneven gasps, shallow and strained. The composure that had made him unshakable all night seemed to fracture, and for a fleeting moment he looked human, vulnerable. The neighborhood gasped as one. The old woman at her doorway took a step forward, her hand flying to her mouth. The whispers spread quickly. "He's not resisting. He's sick. Look at him. Someone help him." Emily broke free from her father's grasp and rushed toward Cole. "No, he needs help." Her tiny hands reached for his arm, trying to steady him as his tall frame wavered under the siren's glow. Bradley's instincts screamed at him to pull her back, to reassert control, but something in the fains in the fives entrance in the fanfantiu, but something in the permna scene froze him. For the first time that night, his daughter wasn't afraid of Cole. She was afraid for him. Dr. Cole managed a faint smile through the pain, lowering himself slightly so Emily wouldn't struggle under his weight. His voice was quiet but steady. "It's all right, sweetheart. Just a little dizzy." Councilman Harris stepped closer, urgency in his tone. "Officer, he needs medical attention, now." Bradley's pride wrestled with the moment. Every fiber of his being wanted to keep control, to deny, to push the narrative he had built. But Cole's labored breathing and his daughter's frantic tears shattered the walls he had built. Emily looked up at him, her voice shaking. "Daddy, do something, please. He's sick." The plea pierced deeper than any reprimand from Harris, deeper than the stares of the neighbors. This was his daughter, his innocent reflection, seeing him not as a protector, But as a man who might let someone die out of pride, Dr. Cole steadied himself, straightening despite the weakness. He adjusted his bag with a trembling hand. "I'm fine," he insisted softly, though his pallor betrayed him. "No need to overreact." But the tremor in his voice betrayed a truth that silence couldn't mask. Bradley's throat tightened. His hand hovered near his radio, torn between calling for medical backup or pretending this was still under control. The badge on his chest weighed like iron, but his daughter's sobs pressed heavier. Councilman Harris's voice sharpened again. "Enough posturing, Bradley. Call it in. He's a doctor, and he needs help. Don't make this worse than it already is." The officer's pride cracked further. He glanced at Cole, then at his daughter clinging desperately to the man he had humiliated minutes before. The irony struck him like a cruel joke. The very man he had tried to paint as a threat was now the one protecting Emily from fear. Emily's small voice rose again, breaking completely. "Daddy, please, don't let him die." The street froze under her words. The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by the faint rasp of Cole's breathing. Bradley's chest rose and fell in rapid, uneven breaths. His hand finally gripped the radio, lifting it toward his mouth, but before he could speak, Dr. Cole steadied himself fully, drawing in a slow, deliberate breath. He raised a hand, signaling he didn't want the call made. His calm returned, though his body betrayed the effort it took. "No need," Cole murmured, voice steady but faint. "I can handle this." His eyes shifted toward Bradley, calm but cutting. "But can you?" The question hung in the air like thunder before a storm. The night pressed heavier with every breath. The cruiser's siren spun lazily, its colors washing the street in waves of blue and red. They flickered across Bradley's face, painting him half hero, half villain, an image he could no longer control. Emily clung to Dr. Cole's arm, refusing to step back. Her sobs had softened, but the fear in her eyes lingered. "Daddy, you're supposed to help people," she whispered, her voice trembling with disappointment. The words dug under his skin like claws. For years, Bradley had lived inside the armor of his badge, defining himself by the power it gave. But now, stripped by his daughter's innocence, he stood naked in the gaze of his neighbors. The badge no longer shone. It weighed. Dr. Cole inhaled slowly, steadying his breath, pulling dignity back into his frame. His calm was deliberate, a quiet victory over the weakness that had tried to betray him moments ago. His dark eyes rested on Bradley, not with hate, not with fear, but with something sharper. Truth. "You see it now, don't you?" Cole's voice was low, almost private, yet it carried across the street what the badge really means when it's wielded without honor. Bradley's fists clenched. "Watch your mouth." But the words lacked fire. His threats felt hollow, stripped of their bite. Harris, standing firm beside them, crossed his arms. "He's not wrong. You've embarrassed yourself, your department, and your community tonight." Neighbors stirred again, whispers cutting like blades through Bradley's pride. Embarrassed himself. Abused his power. His daughter saw everything. His chest tightened. He wanted to lash out, to shout, to force the night back into his control, but the weight of Emily's small hand holding Cole's sleeve anchored him. She hadn't let go, hadn't stepped back to her father's side. That truth burned deeper than all the stares. Cole adjusted the strap of his bag, his composure returned fully. "I don't need your pity, officer," he said softly. "But your daughter deserves a father she can respect." The words were like a scalpel, cutting clean through arrogance. Emily's tear-streaked face turned toward her father, her eyes searching him with a question too raw for her age. "Who are you, really?" Bradley looked at her and for the first time saw the reflection of himself not as a protector, but as the villain in her story. His chest heaved. Shame spread like wildfire, crawling up his neck, flushing his face. His grip on the ID card tightened. His pride screamed not to give it back, not to surrender before his neighbors, his superior, and worst of all, his own child. But Emily's soft voice cracked through his thoughts again. "Daddy, you always tell me lying is wrong. So why? Are you lying now?" The words landed like a final blow. His mask shattered, his armor broke. The silence that followed carried no weight of authority, only the crushing burden of truth. His hand trembled as he lifted the ID card, the plastic glinting like a shard of broken pride under the lights. He stared at it as if it were a mirror, showing him not Dr. Cole's name, but his own reflection, small, desperate, ashamed. Cole's voice broke the silence once more, calm, unshaken. "The choice is yours, officer, but make it in front of her." Bradley looked down at Emily. Her eyes glistened with tears, but there was something else now, expectation. A child waiting to see who her father truly was. The moment stretched. Unbearable. And then Bradley exhaled, long and broken, like a man collapsing under the weight of his own lies. He extended the ID forward, hesitant, trembling, not yet released. But before Cole could take it, the sudden crackle of a police radio shattered the fragile silence. Another cruiser was on its way. Backup. The night wasn't done with him yet. The sound came. First a low rumble of tires over asphalt, then the growing wail of sirens slicing through the night. Red and blue lights bled into the already flashing scene, multiplying the tension until the quiet neighborhood felt like the stage of a public trial. Another cruiser rolled to a stop, doors swinging open in unison. Two officers stepped out, their radios crackling, their eyes sharp as they scanned the standoff. The street was no longer Bradley's domain, it was a stage, and he was caught in its spotlight. "Officer Bradley," one of them called, his voice even, professional. "What's going on here?" Bradley's throat tightened. Sweat beaded at his temple as he straightened, trying to reclaim a sliver of authority. "Routine stop. Suspicious activity. I had the situation under control." But his words sounded brittle, paper-thin. The other officer's gaze shifted from Bradley to Dr. Cole. His sharp eyes caught the stethoscope glinting against the leather bag, the ID card still trembling in Bradley's hand, the small girl clutching Cole's sleeve. His brow furrowed. "Suspicious activity?" he repeated, doubt heavy in his tone. The neighbors stirred again. Whispers grew bolder now, feeding off the safety of numbers. "He's lying. The man's a doctor." His own daughter saw everything. Bradley's skin burned hot. The badge he had always trusted to command silence now felt like an anchor dragging him deeper into disgrace. Emily's small voice rang out, breaking the whispers. "He wasn't doing anything, Daddy. You took his card." Her words hit harder than any witness statement. The new officers froze, their gazes snapping back to Bradley. Silence followed, heavy and damning. Councilman Harris stepped forward, his voice firm. "Enough cover-ups. These people watched it all. You stopped a black doctor in his own neighborhood, humiliated him, and now your own daughter is calling you out." The crowd shifted, emboldened by Harris's words. Curtains pulled back fully, doors creaked open, and neighbors stepped onto porches. The silence that once protected Bradley now betrayed him. Bradley's chest heaved, his pride fighting a losing battle. "You don't understand," he began, but the words broke off as his partner officer cut in sharply. "Return." His identification, Bradley. The command was simple, clear, and final. It wasn't a suggestion, it was the voice of procedure, of law, of justice reclaiming ground. Emily tugged on his sleeve again, her tear-streaked face looking up at him. "Daddy, please." The weight of her voice, combined with the gazes of the crowd, Councilman Harris, the backup officers, and Dr. Cole's calm, unshaken stance, it all crushed the last defenses of his arrogance. His hand trembled as he extended the ID toward Cole. The plastic card, once a trophy of his dominance, now felt like a confession. Dr. Cole accepted it silently, sliding it back into his pocket with quiet dignity. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. His calm made Bradley's humiliation even sharper. The officer's breath came ragged. His world, once defined by control, was collapsing before him, his daughter's tears, his neighbor's judgment, his colleague's disappointment. One of the backup officers stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Bradley, we'll have to file this. You know that, right?" The words were quiet, but they echoed like a sentence. Bradley swallowed hard. His mask was gone. The man who stood there wasn't the officer he pretended to be. It was a father, stripped bare, crumbling under the weight of truth. And as the silence deepened, Emily's small voice rose once more, trembling but certain. "Daddy, I don't want you to be a bad man." The night swallowed her words whole, leaving Bradley with nothing left to hide behind. The night had grown heavy, almost suffocating. Streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows across the pavement where Dr. Cole stood, silent but unyielding. The crowd had swollen larger, spilling across the sidewalks, their whispers swelling like a rising tide. Bradley could feel every eye burning into him, stripping away the shield of his uniform. His badge no longer gleamed, it seemed dull, a piece of metal that mocked him now. For years it had been his weapon, his excuse, his power. But tonight it felt like a curse pinned to his chest. "Officer Bradley." The senior backup officer barked again, stepping forward. "Step back. Now." The command snapped through the night like a whip. Bradley's body stiffened. He wanted to argue, to spit venom the way he always did, but his throat felt dry. His words so sharp and biting before died in his mouth. A tug at his sleeve. "Daddy." Emily's small, trembling voice nearly broke him. He glanced down. Her big, watery eyes stared up at him, shimmering with fear. Not fear of the crowd, not fear of Dr. Cole, but fear of him. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Stop being mean. I don't want you to be a bad man." The crowd fell silent at her words. The entire block seemed to freeze. Her innocence, her fragile truth, struck deeper than any insult or accusation. People didn't just see a cop abusing his authority anymore, they saw a father, exposed in front of his daughter. Bradley's chest heaved. His eyes darted desperately, searching for an ally. But the faces around him were cold, resolute. His fellow officers looked away, their silence condemning. Even the councilman's expression carried no pity, only disappointment. Councilman Harris stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the air. "This is the man you've chosen to be, Bradley. Abusing authority, humiliating those who serve our community. And now, letting your daughter see you like this. Is this who you are?" Bradley opened his mouth, but no sound came. The weight of his sins pressed down on him, suffocating. His arrogance, his unchecked power, all of it seemed to collapse at once. Whispers broke out among the crowd, louder now, no longer afraid. "He's finished." His own daughter begged him to stop. "Did you see the doctor? He didn't even move." Every whisper pierced him like a dagger. Dr. Cole still hadn't raised his voice. He stood with quiet dignity, his bag resting at his side, his posture calm yet firm. He didn't need to fight. His silence was a mirror reflecting Bradley's ugliness for everyone to see. The senior officer extended his hand. "Your report, Bradley. Hand it over. We'll take this from here." The meaning was clear. You're not in charge anymore. Bradley's hand shook as he reached for his notepad. His knuckles whitened, his jaw clenched, his pride screamed inside him, but his body betrayed his weakness. Slowly, painfully, he tore the page free and shoved it into the officer's palm. The badge on his chest suddenly weighed 100 pounds. He touched it instinctively, but instead of pride, he felt shame. He saw Emily watching, her lip trembling, her little hands clutching the hem of her dress. "Daddy," she whispered again, almost inaudible. That single word shattered him more than the crowd, more than the councilman, more than the officers stripping away his power. For the first time in years, Bradley felt small, powerless. Dr. Cole finally spoke, his voice steady and calm, carrying like a sermon. Authority is not measured by how loudly you shout or how many people you can intimidate. It's measured by how you use it to protect, to heal, to lift others up. His gaze lingered on Bradley, not with hatred, but with something far worse, disappointment. Councilman Harris added, his tone firm and unyielding. "You'll answer for this, Bradley. Tonight isn't the end, it's the beginning of accountability." The word accountability echoed like thunder in Bradley's ears. His legs weakened. His world, once built on control and arrogance, was collapsing in front of his daughter, in front of his peers, in front of an entire neighborhood, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The crowd exhaled, as if the tension that had gripped them all night was finally breaking. Yet the air was still heavy, the weight of Bradley's disgrace settling over everything like dust after an explosion. The breaking point had come, and Bradley was broken. Bradley sat in the cramped, dimly lit office of Internal Affairs, the blinds half drawn as if to hide him from the world. The room smelled faintly of dust and old paper, a suffocating reminder of bureaucracy. His badge, once gleaming on his chest, now lay flat on the desk in front of him, stripped of authority and shining only as a piece of cold metal. The silence was unbearable. Only the ticking of the wall clock accompanied him, each second hammering like a nail into his coffin. For years he had commanded rooms with his voice, with his uniform, with the fear his presence carried. Now no one would look him in the eye. "Bradley," a voice finally broke the stillness. It was Captain Morris, the man who had once shielded him through countless complaints. His face was grave, the weight of responsibility heavy in his tone. "We've received the board's decision. You're suspended effective immediately pending termination hearings." Bradley's mouth went dry. He leaned forward, searching for a flicker of the old loyalty in Morris's eyes. "Captain, come on. I've served this city for 20 years. You can't let them do this. You know how this works, we keep it in-house." Morris looked away. "It doesn't work like that anymore. Not after what you did." The words struck harder than any punch. Bradley opened his mouth to argue, but the memory of his daughter's tears, the look of horror on her face, silenced him. For the first time in years, he couldn't summon arrogance, only shame. Outside the station, whispers followed him like shadows. Officers who once laughed at his jokes now turned away. A rookie muttered as he passed, "That's the guy," who, before his partner shushed him quickly. The walls that had protected him for decades were crumbling, brick by brick. By the time Bradley reached the parking lot, his phone buzzed with news alerts. His name was splashed across headlines. "Officer suspended after incident with Black." Dr. Sparks' outrage. The city council was calling for a full review of the department's practices. Bradley gripped the steering wheel of his car, his knuckles white. For the first time in his career, he wasn't feared, he was pitied. Meanwhile, across town, Dr. Cole walked through the hospital halls with a calm presence. Nurses and patients stopped him, offering quiet words of support. "We saw the footage," one whispered. "You handled it with such grace." Cole only nodded, keeping his replies brief. He hadn't wanted fame or recognition. All he wanted was dignity for himself, for his community, for his daughter's future. Yet now, his ordeal was stirring something larger than him. At a city council meeting that evening, Councilman Harris took the floor. His voice carried authority, not just as a leader, but as a son who had once cried for his father. What happened to Dr. Cole is not just about one man. It is about every person who has ever been told they don't belong. Today, we choose dignity over arrogance, justice over silence. The chamber erupted in applause, the sound echoing like thunder. Dr. Cole sat quietly in the audience, his hands folded in his lap. He did not rise, did not bask in the recognition. His strength had always been quiet and unshakable refusal to bend under hate. That night, Bradley returned home to a house that felt emptier than ever. His daughter refused to meet his eyes. She sat on the couch, clutching a small teddy bear, her cheeks still streaked with dried tears. "Sweetheart," Bradley began, his voice cracking. She cut him off with a single line that pierced deeper than any punishment. "Daddy, why were you so mean to him?" Bradley's throat tightened. The man who had once barked orders at criminals and subordinates alike now found himself speechless before a child's question. He turned away, ashamed to let her see the weakness pooling in his eyes. The consequences weren't just professional. They were personal, irreversible. His career could end. His reputation could vanish. But the loss of his daughter's trust, this was a wound that might never heal. At the same time, Dr. Cole's daughter ran into his arms as he returned home. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, her little voice trembling. He kissed her forehead and smiled softly. "I'm okay, sweetheart." Because we stood strong. The embrace wasn't just comfort, it was a symbol. In that simple hug, the world felt a little less cruel and dignity felt a little more possible. Bradley lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the sound of applause that wasn't for him, haunted by the quiet dignity of a man he had tried to humiliate. For the first time in his life, he wondered if arrogance had been nothing more than fear, dressed in a badge and a uniform. And deep down, he knew the real sentence wasn't the hearing or the suspension or the headlines. The real sentence was living with the truth of who he had been and what it had cost him. "You don't deserve to wear that badge anymore." The voice was sharp, echoing through the silent courtroom. Bradley sat slumped in the defendant's chair, his once polished uniform replaced with a wrinkled shirt. His eyes darted nervously, searching for an ally in the crowd, but no one looked at him. The same men who once admired his arrogance now sat stiff, their gazes averted. The room carried a heavy hush. Every face was lit with anticipation, like a community waiting to witness justice being born. On the opposite side of the courtroom, Dr. Cole sat upright, his presence calm and dignified. He wore a simple suit, his stethoscope tucked into his briefcase as a reminder of who he was, not a victim, but a healer. His gaze remained steady, focused not on Bradley, but on the greater moment unfolding. The judge cleared her throat. "Officer Bradley Carter, your conduct was unbecoming of law enforcement. You racially profiled, used unnecessary force, and obstructed a citizen without cause. Worse, that citizen was a doctor, a man you should have protected. The consequences of your actions will echo in this community for years." Each word landed like a hammer, Bradley shrinking further with every sentence. The gallery stirred. Among them sat his daughter, Emily, clutching her mother's hand. Her small eyes glistened with tears, confusion and betrayal written across her young face. She had once believed her father was a hero. Now she was watching that image shatter piece by piece. "Daddy," she whispered, just loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "Why did you do that?" Her words sliced through the silence sharper than any gavel. Bradley froze. His breath hitched. For the first time in his career, he felt naked not from losing authority, but from losing the respect of the one person whose opinion had mattered most. Dr. Cole finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried the weight of years of unspoken battles. I don't seek vengeance. What I want, what this community deserves, is accountability. Because when the law is twisted by prejudice, none of us are safe. He turned slightly, his eyes landing on Emily. His tone softened. And I pray that the next generation never has to see justice in chains. Emily's tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her mother's shoulder. The courtroom was still, the air trembling with the force of truth. Councilman Harris rose from the gallery, his powerful frame commanding attention. This isn't just about one officer. This is about a system that allowed arrogance and racism to hide behind a badge. Today, we begin repairing that. The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement. Some nodded, others wiped silent tears. The atmosphere was no longer heavy with fear, it was alive with hope. Bradley's lawyer muttered something about appeal, but the officer didn't respond. His mind replayed his daughter's trembling words. Every medal, every commendation he had earned meant nothing now. He could still hear his own arrogance. We don't need people like you, echoing back like a curse. The judge's final words sealed it. You are hereby stripped of your badge and sentenced to mandatory service. Perhaps when you stand on the other side of power, you will understand its true purpose. The gavel struck. Justice was done. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight was sharp, almost cleansing. Cameras flashed, microphones extended, reporters shouted questions. But the focus was not on Bradley, it was on Dr. Cole. Doctor, how do you feel now that the trial is over? He paused, then smiled faintly. I feel that we've taken a step forward. Not for me, but for every patient I'll treat, every child who deserves to see fairness, every family who believes dignity still has a place in this world. His words rippled outward, carried by the cameras to homes across the city. As Bradley was escorted down the courthouse steps in handcuffs, a crowd gathered. No one jeered, no one threw insults. They simply watched, silent, a mirror of the respect he had denied others. Emily clung to her mother, still crying. Bradley looked at her one last time, his lips trembling as if to form an apology. But she turned her face away. That rejection cut deeper than the sentence. Dr. Cole stepped into the sunlight, lifting his face toward the sky. For the first time since the encounter, his shoulders seemed lighter. He had not raised a fist, nor shouted in rage. His strength had been his silence, his dignity, his refusal to bend. Councilman Harris placed a hand on his shoulder. You've done more than win a case. You've given this city a mirror and forced it to look. Cole nodded quietly. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand and let the truth do the talking. The chapter closed not with shouts or anger, but with quiet triumph. The badge was stripped, the mask torn away, and the truth left standing. And in that silence, the world shifted one step closer to justice.